Okay, next up. Closely related to gaslighting and ignoring what we know is true and being prone to groupthink and being prone to falling into other conservative religions. Closely related to all of that is that we religious trauma survivors often have an almost pathological unawareness of our bodies. And it just makes sense when you think about it. When sex outside of marriage is completely taboo, when you're not allowed to masturbate, when even having an impure thought or being attracted to someone is seen as potentially dangerous, when pregnancy outside of wedlock is terrifying, and when abortion is not allowed, and when you're not only not allowed to use birth control, but as a child and a teenager, you're maybe barely even taught about how sex works, and you're not allowed to learn about that at school, and on and on and on. When all of that happens, we often learn to ignore our bodies. And some of us were taught kind of that at best they were irrelevant. They're just kind of here to house your soul and carry you through life until death, until you can go back and be with God. Um, so at best, we may have been taught that they were kind of irrelevant, but at worst, we may have been taught that they were troublesome and inherently sinful. And all of this leads us to be very unaware of our physical selves. A lot of us sat for hours during long religious services every single week, ignoring our need to move or to wiggle or to get up and pee or to eat something or to stretch. Um, Many of us, not all, but many religious people were hit in the name of love and hit until we cried and then hit again until we stopped crying. And all of that trains us, not that that's the intention, but it's just one of the side effects. We learn to try to ignore our bodies as much as possible. Um, a dear friend of mine is a former nun and talks about how, as a young nun, she was forced to stand still with her arms stretched out to her sides, holding up books and things as a punishment for some kind of an infraction. And she was a teenager or a young adult by that point. Um, so, you may already know that disassociation is common after all forms of trauma. So, this is not in any way unique to religious trauma, but the denial of the body, ignoring the body, trying to pretend the body is not there, not trying not to feel our physical feelings, um, is a strong trait within formerly ultra religious people. We're just really prone to that and to dissociating. In some forms of Christianity, it's common to study martyrs and make detailed studies of all of the genuinely gruesome details of how Jesus was tortured and crucified. My church tended to study that pretty much every year around Easter to try to make sure that we were adequately grateful for the sacrifice he had made for us. And so, if you grew up in a religion that did those types of things, why wouldn't you shut down your own awareness of your body? Why wouldn't you try not to feel your own physical feelings? Um, you're not supposed to have sexual feelings. You're not supposed, like, your body is kind of mostly here to carry you through life. And then here are all these studies of all of the ways in which you can be harmed physically. Um, it just makes sense that you try to shut it all down and not be aware of it. A lot of us with religious trauma wind up with eating disorders. And it's because for many of us, food, the pleasure that comes from food, was the only physical pleasure that we were really allowed. And yet, for unfortunately, most churches also want us all to be thin. And so it just makes sense that a lot of us wind up with eating disorders because food is a pleasure that is allowed, and yet we're supposed to be thin, and that is inherently a conflict. And it winds up causing trouble for us later on. So I do a lot of somatic exercises with people. Somatic means of the body. Um, and so I do a lot of exercises with my clients to help them get more in touch with their bodies, and we do it little by little by little. I've noticed that I have to be really patient about it, both with myself and with my clients, because getting that awareness of our bodies back is very difficult for many of us. And I think we are often pretty profoundly and persistently we're resistant to it. We don't want to get back in touch. Even when we make it a goal, a lot of times we find ourselves not following up on that goal. Even if it's something really simple, like to stretch for a few minutes, or to exercise for 3 minutes, or to eat when we're hungry, or to eat mindfully, or anything at all, it takes time to start tuning back in. Um, it takes time to want to start tuning into all of that, and it takes time to develop that awareness again. But the patience is worth it. We don't have to recover from this overnight. We don't have there's I don't think it's really possible to overnight become completely, totally, happily aware of our bodies. We just stay patient with it, and gradually we try different things, and we see what feels good and we see what doesn't feel good, and we just take it in baby steps, and it works. Um, but like with all of my previous points, this is all exacerbated by the fact that so many of us were taught to ignore our bodies from such an early age. It may be that I'm told I was on a church pew the first Sunday morning that I was alive. So some people were in a nursery or in junior church or something like that, depending on the type of religion that you grew up in. So you may have not been having to sit still from a super early age, but a lot of us were. And I noticed that kids that didn't grow up ultra religious, they still usually got taught all of this at some point. Most kids eventually get sent to school for kindergarten or first grade or what have you, and they have to learn to sit still, and they have to learn that they have to ask for permission to take a bathroom break, and they have to wait for lunchtime, and all of those things. It gets indoctrinated into us eventually that we need to ignore our bodies to some extent. But a lot of people who grew up very religious learned it from the time that they were babies and toddlers, and so it makes it that much more of a strong trait within us. And we just take it patiently and get back in touch little by little by little. I've got lots of exercises to help people do that, and I've done those exercises myself because it's something that I'm still learning, but it's very rewarding being in touch with your own body. If you're not very, you might have to take my word for it that it's worth it, that it's worthwhile, that you'll actually enjoy being more in touch with your body. But really, really, not just because of sex, which is fantastic, not just because of food, but for 1,000 different reasons, it feels good to be in touch with our bodies. And that is the case no matter how unin touch you might be now. It's just really, really a rewarding thing. Up next, I'm going to talk in a lot more detail about what it's like to grow up queer and or trans in the conservative religions, but I'm also going to talk about how homophobia and transphobia really traumatizes everyone, including straight and cisgender people. It's just worse for the LGBTQ community, much, much worse. Hey, a really quick note that I'm going to tack on to the end of a few of these videos. If you think that you might like to work with me one-on-one, then you might want more information about that. You can either look for the last video in this series, which I'm literally just going to call How to Work with Me, or you can go to my website and find out more about how I do this. I do all of my coaching on Zoom, so you can be any place in the world, doesn't matter where you are. I give you more information both in the wrap-up video and on my website about rates and how often to see me and all of the logistics of it. So if you're interested, check those things out.